where am I up to in this story? So you've got it right, and I think that one of the first people that she got in touch with was, I've forgotten his name, but he was a professor at the University of Melbourne, and through him, there were recruited, as you said, people, high up people, and people with money, and she just took control of them, and she told them who they were going to marry and who they were going to leave their husbands, and they were going to have babies with this one or with that one, and handing their money over and going to live in different countries. And she was manipulating them, and she was uh, having meetings where she was saying that she was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, and all this sort of stuff. And she was using all these drugs on people, and apparently they didn't really know what was going on. And so with me, when the the police were all involved with this, and these psychiatrists and people were questioning my children and questioning me, and my children, to their credit, they were only babies. They um, told their stories of what was going to happen, that they were going to be protected from Alan Parker. And so then all hell broke loose, that I was being shunted around with my children to these various agencies, like the social welfare people. They're known as docs in New South Wales, but these protective agencies. And so then I kept asking, when is this all going to end? I can't take any more, because he was saying that he hadn't done anything. And then with my eldest son, he was the one that informed. I was later on told he was the one that informed the police to go to my house, because I was abusing my child mentally, my son, by spreading these rumours or saying to these people that he was abusing my children. And I said, no. I said, no. I said, it's not my son. I said, it's this handler, this Alan Parker. And when they interviewed the children, they said, we're not going to take it any further because the children are so young. And anyway, so all these agencies became involved, and I said I wanted it ended. I said, I just want to go away with my children, but they wouldn't leave it at that. My children they made the children wards of the state, and I don't understand why they did that. They made my daughters wards of the state, and I had put my son with his own natural father. So he was out of the picture, because I was trying to take care of these three little girls who were absolutely traumatized and terrified of him, as I was. And then I started to have the flashbacks. But what happened was that the next thing I knew, I'm not sure how long after it was, that the protective workers said that they wanted to take it to court, and I would get custody of the children, and keep him away from them. Anyway, we went into they went into the children's court in Melbourne, and Alan Parker later on told me that they deliberately, I said, "Who's they?" And he said, "Oh, you'll find out." They deliberately took the case into the children's court because there were no records held, because it's to do with children. And we went into the court. He had a solicitor. The protective people had a solicitor, and I had a solicitor. And we went into the court, and they strung it out for weeks on end. And I couldn't understand why they strung it out, talking about, oh, she's not a good mother because the children don't know what mushrooms are. She never feeds them anything like this. And I thought, this is all strange, all these things that they're saying. But anyway, getting back to, we went into the court with the children saying about the sexual abuse. They did a video on the children talking about it. I had a child psychiatrist saying that indeed they had been sexually abused and that this relationship was bad for me, and that she was supporting me. And there was a few other things too, which were, yes, there was another thing that Alan Parker, he was working for community services as a childcare officer, and he was, I was told he was suspended with full pay from that job, and they told me that.
Sorry, can I stop you there a moment?
I thought,
so your handler.
Yes.
Are we talking about your handler now? So just to be clear, your handler, the man who had been raping the children, the man who had wanted to bring you closer to the cult and get you to become a full-fledged member to go and live at the cult premises, and the man who had taken you to the hospital and introduced you to the doctors and the nurses that were trying to take your children to give them to Anne Hamilton because you were obviously the perfect nominee for mind control. He actually worked for child services.
Yes, he worked for child services. He worked with boys at a boys' home that were the end of the road children. These children were not able to be to have therapy, or they were not able to, in a way, get fixed. They were teenage boys, and and he used to tell me all these absolute dreadful stories which used to traumatize me, of what the boys were doing to each other and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, he worked, and he was seeing the children at this time for 2 hours a fortnight in a locked room or a locked building, and under the supervision of a worker. So I had all of that, and the solicitor for the community services, the welfare people, she told me that that I wouldn't lose my children. But then I started getting these flashbacks. Sorry, I'm just getting. I'll just take a breath. Hang on.
While you're taking a breath, is this the picture that you were talking about that was on the website? And is that you on the right hand side, right at the back, the tallest of the people in the picture?
Yeah, the girl with the long hair. and she's
That's
got
you.
puffy sleeves, yeah. And the little girl in the front, which I haven't gone into, is actually my daughter. I didn't know. This starts to get very complicated. Um, I had a daughter when I was early on, probably about 21, and um, they um, took the child at about, I believe, at about 7 months. My husband was away and didn't know I was pregnant. But when he came home, he asked me all sorts of questions. He said, about examinations, that gynecological examinations that would have changed my body, as it were. And I said no, and I had no memory of any of this. And so then when I went, this is how I found out about it. And then when I went to have examinations for my eldest son, when I was pregnant with him, the doctor said, "Oh, this is your second child." And I said, "Oh no, I haven't had any other children." And he talked to me and he said, "All right," he said, "I'll keep the secret if your husband doesn't know about it." Um, anyway, so that little girl was my child, and she was taken from me. And I was studying at Teachers College, and I, be, I became isolated from other students, and I had a dreadful year. And even though I was a bright student, I failed a couple of the subjects, and I had to do make-up assignments because I was so traumatized with what was going on. And then we were in the courtroom, and I had the solicitor lawyer from the protective group, and she said, "There's no evidence that you have been a bad mother or the children should be taken from you," all of this. Anyway, I began having flashbacks, and I wrote it down, what I was being threatened with. And of course, I went to my barrister, and I told him, I said, "I'm having these memories." I said, "I don't know what's going on." I said, "I think he's involved with some satanic stuff or whatever." And I told him. Now, the previous day, I thought there were a lot of strange things were happening in the court proceedings, and my barrister wasn't stopping these things being said. And Alan Parker, the magistrate, said how wonderful Mr. Parker was because he had been given the video of the children talking about the abuse, and he had made a transcript of it. And I couldn't believe that this would happen. And then when we were going through the transcript and whatever, I was saying to my solicitor, "That's not true. That's not what they said. This is all wrong. He's writing it all down. It's all wrong," to suit himself. And so that afternoon, the what was he called? The not barrister. Yeah, it was the barrister. He put me in his car and took me to my solicitor's office, and my solicitor at that time was no longer taking care of my case. They put another person in charge, and I found out that my solicitor had been transferred. She'd got a better job in the family court in Melbourne. She became the assistant magistrate, assistant registrar. And
So
Ellen,
basically, it sounds like a classic case of corruption where the
yes,
judge was in on it. Even your lawyer had been probably bribed by the looks of things and offered a great cushy job if
yes,
she steps out of the way. Um, and the evidence itself had been somehow tampered with and changed and twisted around. I want to ask you one thing about this picture before I take it down off the screen.
yes,
Now, do you remember the day of this photo? And I've got a few questions related to this that I want to ask you. One of the things is you realize that this photograph was taken on the premises of the family house. The meeting, this is HQ. The lake is in the background, yes?
yes. And you can see a girl there, and she's got red hair. That was the only child that was kept her red hair, and she was Anne Hamilton's daughter, Sarah. Now
Now,
they,
the real question is the premises. You said to me you didn't actually go to the premises, but this is taken in front of the house.
yes, I was. I had no memory of being.
How did you get to be on this premises at that time at such a young age? Because this abuse had gone on for years, and you said to me you didn't actually remember having ever been on premises. But there's a photograph of you on premises that you didn't realize
Yeah,
you had been at,
yes, and
right?
then I was being taken there by my handler. He was taking me to Eildon quite often on so-called fishing trips, and he would take me up there, and I'd fall asleep at night or whatever, and he would bring me back. And I know that it was during those times that I was up there, and I was up there on weekends, and I have sort of memories of bits and pieces of memories, such as I have a memory of the police used to often come to that Anne Hamilton Byrne house. I think they were getting reports of children being isolated or things, but nothing sort of sexual. And they used, and I remember her. I had to get down in a secret passage. All the children were put into a secret passage, um, um, and I was put there. It was like a part of the um, floor had been taken up, and then later on a mat would be put over there. So the children were, all the children that were there were not known to be there by the police. They were hidden. And Sarah wrote about this in her book, how they were hidden. And so then I had other memories of being there, and the so-called police. I don't know whether they were police or they were security people, because their uniforms are very similar. And I was told that I had to do sexual things or allow sexual things to take place, because these men, these police, were going to rape Sarah or the other children, and the other children were young, and um, and I had to do the business, as it were. And of course, I said, well, I'd do it if it would save these other younger children. But it was all set up with what they what they did. Anyway, getting back to what happened in the courtroom and how they got hold of my children. So they took me into the solicitor's office, and this barrister and this other woman said, look, we've decided that what needs to be done is that you need to be not at the court hearings. It's obviously distressing you, and there's nothing there that would cause your children to be handed over to him, whatever. And they said, you have to stay at home. And I said, no, I want to go into the court proceedings. And they said, well, if you come into the court proceedings, I'm not going to act as your barrister. And she said, I'm not going to act as your pains to find a solicitor who would help me with this, with my children, and I would be without a solicitor. So I agreed to it. And so I stayed home, and they said, if we need you, we will call you. They did call me, and they said there is some kind of, hang on.
I want to show you the room where they kept you. Can I show you a video of the room where they kept you? Tell me, is this the same room? May I put it on the screen quickly?
Yes, it's only
You
only got
mentioned
it on
it. I found some
small.
footage of it.
Yes, you've only got a small photo. I don't know whether I might be able to see it.
No, I'm gonna make it larger if you give me a minute.
And we'd all pile through here.
Through that hole?
Yeah.
28 of you in there.
Up to 28, yeah.
That is disgusting. That is abhorrent abuse.
We'd just be absolutely still. We were very well disciplined anyway. We were used to not moving a muscle on pain of punishment. Plus we were scared of the police, scared of the outside world. Because they said that if they found us, we'd get the blame and we'd be taken away and beaten in sacks.
It was the auntie's job to hide the children at any cost.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the room. And so I had these memories and things that came back. But can I get back to the court proceedings, which we need to talk about to get the line on how they took my children. Anyway, they convinced me not to go to the court, and then they called me in because they said there was a question about my mental state, and they had me see a psychiatrist. A psychologist. Her name was Jill someone or other, and I went to see her, and she did these extensive tests on me, and then they called me in to the courtroom when she was to give evidence, and she gave evidence that she found nothing mentally wrong with me, and they cross-examined her. Anyway, I never gave any evidence at all. They never put me on the witness stand. I never did anything like that. And then the outcome, the report was given that the magistrate was handing giving the custody to Alan Parker, to my handler, and he had 2 hours access to the children previous to this, and I had all those things that I told you about, and I was absolutely devastated. And throughout the time that they were building up to this court case, they did a lot of things that that could put me in a difficult light. You know, I had the children late for school and different things like this. I'd put the children in another school and different things like this, and this all went against me. And the magistrate did this big long report, and he said, and then the mother can have a couple of hours or a weekend access every so often. And then he said that I needed to be psychiatrically evaluated, and I wanted to get onto this. I had no knowledge of what I'd gone through, and I was ringing up the protective services and saying, I want to get on with this. I'll get a psychiatrist. And they said, no, we'll get one. So they organised a psychiatrist. And I later on found out that he was in the same facility as this child psychiatrist that did the examinations on my children. So a picture was starting to be formed, but I thought, no, I'm just a bit crazy thinking like this. And they sent me along to this psychiatrist, and he did a report, and he said how I was a good mother, and he said all these things, and it came back to the court, and then they said that I could have this access. But the handler, Alan Parker, and his people, the family, had it all organised how they were going to get the children away from me, and that I wasn't to have access to them. So they took it back, and they said that I was denied access to the children. And I went along to this psychiatrist 2 or 3 times a week for at least 3 or 4 years, and I wasn't able to see my children. I was teaching school in a primary school, and I thought this would stand me in good stead when we went for the custody. When I went for the custody,
Just one point.
Yes.
I want to make for our viewers.
Yes.
So basically, you had been found to be totally okay by a psychologist during the case originally. Then later
Yes.
on, there was a psychiatrist who had written a letter saying that you were totally fine and gone on record for the courts. And you had
Yes.
even gone for psychiatry to prove that you were a good mother, and you still weren't given access. And during all of this time, you were still working as a primary school teacher. So there was no cause for social services to see you as a threat to children. Let's just be clear about that, because had that been the case, they would have struck you from the records as a teacher, right? And
Yes.
full custody was given to the man who had been raping the children. Sorry to use that word, but that's what it
Yes.
was.
Yes. And so then I was seeing this psychiatrist, and I was telling him all the flashbacks that I was having. And the first thing I said to him, I said, I don't understand what this means, but if she will not accept it on a subconscious level, she will not accept it on a conscious level. This was in connection to having my eldest daughter given away for adoption or whatever. And I told him that, and he said, I don't know. And anyway, so then for 3 or 4 years, I was working as a teacher, and what they also do is they tangle you up financially, so that you haven't got any money to do anything, or you're stressed out the whole of the time. And so this was to go into the family court. He now had access for the last 3 or so years, and I won't go into what happened to the children, but my barrister, my solicitor, said we will take it into the children's court now, and you need to just go for a couple of hours access to them every fortnight. And I said, no, you go for the full custody. And she said, you'll never get it and whatever. Anyway, so the psychiatrist, Ross Robinson, he's now passed, he showed me the report that he did, and it was an absolute glowing report that I had submitted to any test that he needed to do, and he had access to me 2 or 3 times a week for at least 3 years or so, 4 years. And he showed me the report, and he said, there's no reason why there's no reason to believe that this woman shouldn't have access to her children, or indeed have full custody to the children. And we went into the court, and I had been sent along to these by my solicitor to all these people, psychiatrists, psychologists, and this is where I found out the psychologist that I had gone to see and who tried to take my eldest daughter. I went along, she made an appointment with me, and I went in and I said to the receptionist, I'm here to see so-and-so, so-and-so. And she said, oh, your name is not down on the list. You haven't got an appointment. I said, yes, I have. Anyway, and this psychologist came out of her office and said, oh, come with me. And I went in to see her, and I thought I was there to talk about what had happened to the children. But all she wanted to know was my relationship with the handler. And I said, why are you asking about him? I don't understand. And anyway, so she was in court and saying that that she believed that Alan Parker was the better person to have the children, and there were 3 or 4 psychiatrists, and there were different people that were in there, and they were all against me. And now I was absolutely.
Can I ask you, for clarity, how many children were there, and were they all the children of Alan Parker, or was one of the children from your previous marriage?
There was one children from my previous marriage, but I had put him with his natural father, so he was out of the picture. I asked him when this came up with the abuse, was he questioned, and he said he was questioned, and he said nothing happened. He said, I don't know what the girls were talking about. He said they interviewed me and there was nothing that happened. But I believe that his father, who was a weak man, I now see him as a weak man, he told me that his son, our son, was not to be involved. He's out of it, and this is your problem and your daughter's problem. And he wouldn't, my son wouldn't support the girls, but my daughters insisted upon that he was being abused as well. I later on found out that we were being, I was being used, and my son was being abused before I had my daughters. We were being abused in lots of different ways, and in rituals and things like that. We were being used. Anyway,
What kind of rituals?
Satanic rituals. I didn't know exactly. I tried to remember, but I couldn't remember the exact rituals. But I know that was happening, but I didn't remember them. There were certain things that I didn't remember. Now, whether they were,
May I
yeah,
add some information here?
yeah.
For those of you that don't know, for the viewers, Anne Hamilton Burns was a medium, and she used to work as a medium. She was a yoga teacher. She also used to consider herself a prophet, and she used to channel beings that were deceased. And she was very interested in the occult. And there were many occult philosophies and occult practices being taught at the family. And most of the people that were involved were interested in the occult, just for those that don't know. Please do continue. Sorry to interrupt you.
So, all these different people were brought into the courtroom, mostly psychiatrists and whatever, and supporting the handler and not me. I was absolutely frightened with it, and I had my eyes closed because I thought, I'm not going to allow him to see me cry. So because I knew that I was going to lose my children, and I had my eyes closed. And then towards the end of it, they called me to the witness stand, and I remember regressing, as it were. His barrister said, come on, look at this, and he yelled at me, and he held this piece of paper up, and I looked up at the paper, and I think there were different ways that they put me under control. There were different hand signals. There were all these different things that occurred, and I felt myself regress to a young girl, and I couldn't climb up on the chair, the witness chair, and the what was he called, the judge. He said, "What's the matter with her?" And I couldn't climb up on the step because I was a young girl. I'd regressed to a young girl. And then the next thing I knew was that I was hysterically crying. I could hardly.
Can I point out something? And I think it's really important here. You don't have recognition or memory of being in the cult when you were a child, but the fact that you could be regressed to such a young age means that psychological abuse and cycles had started. Now, I've done a lot of research over 20 years into how super soldiers and MK Ultra and how they create these altars within people, and they normally start with children. Now, is there a chance that you had been part of this since you were a child and you didn't know about it? Like, had your family possibly involved you in this as a child? You said you came from a dysfunctional family. Is there any chance of this?
I believed that my eldest sister, who was 7 years older than me, used to hitchhike with me down to Melbourne, and I think that she was involved with this group. But what
age was that? How old were you? You must have, I'm talking about when you were 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old.
Probably about 10 or so then. But what happened was that when I was 3 years old, and Alan Parker had said to me, "Oh, I know more about you than what you do." And there were many people that I met, psychiatrists or people or just so-called friends whom I met, and they said, "What happened to you when you were 3 years of age?" And I said, oh, nothing. And they said, you nearly died when you were 3. And so apparently this is when I learned to be able to dissociate, was out of my body. This young man in the small town where I lived, he used to regularly abuse me. I believe my family didn't know, but so there was abuse from an early age where I learned to dissociate, and I
When you
believe that
when you say
systems.
disassociate, do you mean traveling out of your body?
Yes, being out of my body, as an example of, I did go to the police in 2015, and I told the policewoman there, she said, give me an example of what happened. And I said, I was at the boys' home and I was lying on the floor, and the boys were all lined up, 15, 16, 17-year-olds. And I said, there were youth officers, including these people, and I told her the names, and I said they were stood there and they were watching me being raped. And I said I was floating on the ceiling, as it were. I was out of my body and I was watching this. And I said that I wanted to go to the toilet, and they said, and I said, I'll be quick. And I was a little girl talking that I wanted to go to the toilet. And I went to the toilet, I ran to the toilet and ran back and lay down and got raped further. And they were all laughing and whatever. Now, when I told
When you say a little girl, you mean what kind of age?
about 8 or so, 8 years old, something like that, or 9, something like that. And then the police officer said to me, I'm not going to investigate this. There's too many people that you've named. And I started crying, and I said, you've got to save my daughters, you know. And she wouldn't believe me. I was being threatened all the time by Parker and by other people, professional people, that if I wasn't careful, I would be shoved into the mental home, a psychiatric home, and I would be locked up. And Alan Parker was often telling my children, oh, your mother's mad. She'll get locked up, or she should be locked up, and all this sort of thing. And twice when I spoke with the police about this and said that I wanted to do a statement, when I said that I was being sexually abused in 2007, no, when in 2007, I told them that I wanted this to be investigated and whatever. And then they called in the mental health people who didn't understand it anyway, and they shoved me into the mental hospital, and they tried to get me to say that I had made it all up to get attention or to get money or whatever. And I said, no, I haven't. This is what has happened, and this is how it's done. And if you want to get more information, you can ring the Ross Institute in the United States, because I'd spoken to them. I tried to get an appointment over there, and I had got a loan to get money to go over there, and it had been stopped by my solicitor, and that I didn't have the finances to do it. And I said, if you want to get information or confirmation of what I'm telling you, you have to speak with the Ross Institute in Dallas, Texas. Anyway, they put me into the hospital for a number of weeks, and they tried to get me to say that this hadn't happened to me.
May
Yep.
I ask, just which hospital and where? What was it called and where was it?
This was the Orange Base Hospital. I lived at Orange, New South Wales.
Was this the
and,
one that was owned by Anne Hamilton Burns?
No, this was completely completely different. Anyway, so then in 2012, I once again was severely traumatized by what they had done to me the night before, and when I woke up, I went to my doctor, and I confided in him how I had been SRA, satanic ritually abused, and I told him a lot of information over a number of years. And so I went to him and I said to him that I had been raped and I had been tortured. I had a cigarette burn on my face where a cigarette had been put out on my face, and I've still got that mark now. And I went and saw him, and I said, I want to be examined, and now I have like the evidence that this is really happening to me. Because when I went to professional people, and in particular the police, they would say to me, where's your evidence? You haven't got any evidence. We're not dealing with it. When you've got your evidence, then come back to us. And this went on for many years. And so I was went to this doctor, and he said, go to the hospital at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they will be able to have time to deal with what you're saying. And I was quite happy with that, and I sort of calmed down a bit. I had been looking after foster children. I didn't have any at the moment, but I still had contact with a couple of the boys, and I told them that I would be back that afternoon. One of the boys, I said I had been raped the night before, and I showed him the bruises on my legs and whatever, and he said later on that he had never seen me like that. So traumatized. He didn't say traumatized, but that's the word I'm using. And anyway, so I went to the hospital, drove my car there, and went to the hospital and told them what had happened. And I said I wanted to be examined professionally for having been raped or being abused and whatever. They procrastinated and whatever, and they dragged it on for hours until maybe 8 or 10 o'clock at night. No, it was later than that, 10 or 11 o'clock. And I said, when am I going to be examined? And the next thing, they'd called in the mental health people, and this woman had that spoke with me. She was now in charge of the mental health facility at Orange. And the next thing I knew, two big security guards came in, and they said, you've got to come with us. And I said, what for? And they said, you've been sectioned. And I was very, very angry, and they took me in, and then they did all their things that they needed to do, and they put me in a room, etc., with a lot of schizophrenics and a lot of people, and I was absolutely terrified. And so I saw a psychiatrist on the Friday, and she just took details, and she said, that's enough for today. And I hardly saw anyone that could help me. I contacted, I think it was refuge people or rape crisis. I contacted them, and they said you can be examined and whatever, and you have to ask for this and so forth and so on. And the weeks went by, and they had a doctor and a female doctor, and they had a psychiatrist, and they both got together. And I said, I want to be examined. And the doctor said, there's nothing wrong with you. And I said, yes, there is. I said, I had all these bruises which are now fading and whatever. Anyway, so then they told me, they doped me up on medication, and I could hardly stand up. I was going to sleep all day, and they were waking me up all the time. And I said, I can't take any more medication. They were making sure that I was swallowing the tablets and all that sort of thing. And they had me on 500 grams or whatever. And I said, I can't take any more. I don't want to take any more. And they said, it's not your choice. We can do what we want with you. And they said, we can take you up to 800, which was nearly twice what I was on, and I'd be an absolute zombie. Anyway, during that time I was in the hospital, I had a flashback of being raped. How that came about was the youth officers that where my husband worked at the boys' home were given jackets or waterproof jackets, a navy blue type of jacket, and that's what I used to see. I now know when I was being raped, and when I was in the hospital, uh, a worker from the hospital came in with that same jacket, that same government issue jacket. And I apparently went berserk, and I thought that I was going to get raped again. And so this person that I saw in the hospital, she went and got the nurses, and I told her what had happened. I said, I've remembered, and I thought I was going to get raped because of the same jackets that were on this person, and that had happened to me many times before. And later on, I thought, oh, well, they'll question me about this, but they never did. And when I asked for my record of, freedom of information, they put on there that she's had another episode. It was classed as an episode, and this continued with anywhere I spoke with the police or anyone. It was just, oh, she's unwell. She's having an episode, and anyway, so I was being questioned. I was being told that I was going to be put into a mental house, a mental home, and my children were being told this, that your mother is mad. She's going to get put into a hospital where they'll look after her. And I was told by the handler that when I was in there, when they put me in there, then I'd get raped by all the officers in there. So I was getting threatened with being raped and whatever. Anyway, so I was telling them in the hospital about a lot of things. I said, oh, I want my car taken care of. It's in the car park in the hospital. And the nurses were saying to me, "You've got no car." And I said, "Yes, I have. I drove it here." And they said, "No, you haven't." And anyway, they found out that I did and took care of that. And then there were other things that happened as well. And I said, "I've got dogs at home and I've got a house that, you know, that I own." And they said, "You've got no house." And I said, "Yes, I have." And I finally went to the house, and the foster kids were living in. A couple of them were living in the house, and there were a lot of things that sort of happened that they were telling me were not true, and I said they were true. Anyway, so I asked my sister, not this eldest one, this other one, to come down from Queensland to get me out of there. And she came down, and I was leaving the hospital there at about 9 o'clock in the morning, and I was staying at home and doing my things that I needed to do. And I was coming back at about 9 o'clock at night. She was bringing me back. And my house was being broken into a number of times. And this was the story of my life where um, my house was being broken into, or paperwork where I had written all this down with what had happened to me with the Anne Hamilton Burn group, and it was all stolen from my house. And the nurse that night said to my sister, "What do you think is wrong with your sister?" And my sister said, "What do you mean?" She said, "All the um, unreal things that she has said about her house being broken into, and the police being there and doing reports and all this sort of thing." And my sister said, "That's all true. That's all true what she is saying." And so the next day they called me in. They said I could go home, and they'd during that week they'd questioned me and tried to get me to say this was all made up, and that none of it was true, and that I didn't have my children taken from me, and I didn't do this and I didn't do that. And they kept on trying to get me to say that the this was all fabricated, that I hadn't experienced all of this. And so I was saying that, and I asked for reports and things to be given to me, and I talked to the yoga teacher. This was nothing to do with Anne Hamilton Burn, and I said to her, "Look at this." I said, "This is what they're writing about me." And she said, "This is all wrong." She said, "This is all wrong. This didn't happen." She said, "Not in my class," because they had people coming in and doing classes with these inmates, as it were, of the mental hospital. And she said, this is not all true." She said, "You were cooperative, and I found you to be very intelligent, and I found you to be this." And she said, "This is all right."